Did you hear that? Good morning, gentlemen. Shavua Tov. And we're talking about the various ingredients in menachos and the sachim, especially yayin, wine. And the last thing we discussed was certain kinds of inferior quality wines that have been disqualified for the sachim. And hopefully we'll get a chance to discuss the impact on Kiddush, on the mitzvah of Kiddush on Friday night, which is equated to the sachim. So we spoke about kanditon, which is sweet wine. We spoke about yayin mevushal, yayin me'ushan, and all the above are pasul mizbeach. Some, however, and this is what we covered at the end of the shir on Thursday, are of the opinion that when yayin becomes sweet on its own, then it's pasul. But if he actively uses a process in order to sweeten the wine, then although that's not the wine we want to use l'chatchila, but b'diavad we can use that wine because obviously he's improving the quality of the wine. If on its own it becomes sweet, there's something that's wrong in the process here. Okay, fine. As far as yayin ma'ushan is concerned, which we said was sort of like vaporized, there are those who have the opinion that if the grapes are what we call bitter, marin, then you can actually subject the grapes to a process of ma'ushan, where the steam, and you take the bottle of wine and you pass it over the steam, that will actually improve the taste and the quality of the wine, remove some of its bitterness, and therefore we can use it for the mizbeach. Now, in a case of yayin recho ra, if it has a very foul smell, for example, you put it in old barrels of wine, like wooden barrels that have a foul smell, that's going to impact the wine, lower its quality, and disqualify it for mizbeach. Now, the next piece over here, one line, I don't understand. But I'll give you my intuitive explanation. But at the face of it, it's very difficult. He says, Nechluku tanoim b'yayin yoshan l'das Rebbe ein meviyim mimenu nesach v'chacham machshiv. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi disqualifies yayin yoshan. I mean, that really, undermines everything we know, because we always say that yayin, the older it is, the better it is. But apparently, Rebbe felt that there are like 3 periods of time in the production of wine. The early period of time, it's too sour. It's just the beginning of fermentation. We have to wait 30 days in order to use that wine on the mizbeach. Then we go through a period of time where the wine is excellent quality. And then at some point, which right now is undefined, Rebbe holds it becomes too old. And the fermentation process continues too long. It's about to become sour. So that yayin yoshan we don't want to use. Okay, now we get to what I call social distancing, or wine barrel distancing. Sometimes if you put too many barrels near each other, it does not have a good effect. The impact is that it speeds up the process of fermentation and causes spoilage. So here's the deal with regard to distancing. The Mishnah tells us in Masechta Menachos that after you've taken the grapes through the process of what's called dricha, you took it to the wine press, and now you place the wine into small barrels. Meinichen osan achas achas. Each barrel should be set up in its own place, in its own fixture. It should not be placed together with one barrel on top of the other. Below shteim zu etzel zu. You should not put one barrel next to the other. Shema tiskalkel achas mihen. We're always afraid that one of these barrels might go sour. V'tiskalkel gam es hachavios hasmuchos lo. Again, it's like Corona all over again, right? If somebody has Corona, then if somebody is too close to him, he might get infected. Here also, if the wine gets infected and it's beginning to spoil and ferment, then if there's a barrel right near it, it's going to have a contagious impact and lower and diminish the quality of the wine that's next to it. And that is a Mishnah in Masechta Menachos. However, there's a brisa, and the Gemara Menachos elsewhere in a different place quotes a brisa, and according to there's a machlokas how the Girtz is in a brisa, but we're gonna present the Rambam's text of the brisa. Ein menichim es achavios achas achas lo shtayim shtayim el sholosh sholosh. Interesting. The Rambam is saying the following, that the more the better. Now, we would have said that based on the Mishnah, and as our understanding of the Mishnah says you should put them achas achas, you should not put them in pairs. How much more so, you shouldn't put them into threes, into triplets. The Rambam has a girsa in the brisa, which comes to the opposite conclusion, that although it's not a good idea to put one next to the other, and not in pairs of two, but when you get groups of 3 barrels of wine, that actually is helpful and improves the quality of the wine. And therefore, the Rambam writes, sholosh sholosh, if you pile 3 barrels, one on top of the other, or line them up one next to each other, then mitoch kach mischazek tamayan. It actually has the opposite effect. Instead of causing fermentation and spoilage, it strengthens the wine and improves the quality of the wine. Let me just if you don't mind. Now we're going to discuss the following. When you put wine into a barrel, do you want the wine to go all the way up to the cover lid of the barrel, or do you want to leave some airspace? It's not recommended to fill the wine up until the lid, to the top, but rather leave some airspace. It's very healthy for the wine to be aired out. This is true even today. I don't have to tell you this. You open up a bottle of Cabernet Sauvignon or of Merlot, whatever you're opening up, and you let it breathe, right? Letting wine breathe is healthy for the wine. If you fill the barrel up to the top with wine, he's saying that the wine is being strangled, and somehow the good taste of the wine is going to have to go beyond the barrel. So it's always a good idea, because putting the wine in the barrel is healthy for the wine, but on the condition that you leave some airspace between the top level of the wine and the lid over the barrel. And finally, lo there is some amount of wine that actually gets trapped in the lid itself. Apparently, the lid, like even our corks to some extent, if you have a wooden lid, there's some porous nature to the lid, and it absorbs some of the wine. That wine, even if you could extract it from the lid, should not be used for the nesachim. Lo meviyim me'ayayin shebepiach chavis, in the peh itself, in the mouth or the lid, mipnei shekmachim mitzuyim sham. What happens is that they place bread or other baked goods on top of these barrels. This was common practice in those days. And what happens is the lid absorbs not only the wine below it, but also some of the flour or the baked goods on top. So you have in the lid a, a small volume of wine, which is not of great taste and not of great quality because of the kmochim, the various flour that they put on top of the barrel. Now, what about the wine on the bottom of the barrel? That too should be avoided. Why? So the sediments of the wine, so they will sink to the bottom of the barrel. That's hence the phrase, the idiomatic phrase, bottom of the barrel. And that's not the wine that you want to use. Ella, but rather, you want the wine that's in between the lid on top and the sediments on the bottom. Now, strangely, the Mishnah calls this a shlish. At the face of it, that's very difficult. But apparently, because you have this airspace on top of the highest level of the wine in the barrel, so there's air between that level of the wine and the lid. The lid itself apparently was quite thick, and that's not the wine you want to use. The sediments also collect a certain serious percentage of the space inside the barrel. You're left at the end for the nesachim with a shlish. Now, again, if you're selling wine on the open market, you can probably expand the volume of wine that you're selling. But for the nesachim, we have to up the ante. We have a very high standard, and if we only want that wine in the middle of the barrel. According to another Girs in the Mishnah, and I think he quotes this in the name of the Rambam as well. Let me just see if I'm right. Yes, the Ram Yisur Mizbeach Perek Zayin. The Ram is of the opinion that even the middle wine in the barrel, for the sake of the great mitzvah of Nesachim that's going on in Mizbeach, we should divide that into 3 sections and take the middle wine of the middle shlish. That's the most superior quality one. That's going to win the prize and get to go on the Mizbeach. Okay, Rabbi, so now we're beginning a new topic in the world of menachos, but it's really something that will impact on all of Kodshim. So we're looking at Kodshim from the perspective of menachos, and our subject today is what's called Kiddush Kli Sharis. Let me explain. A mincha is made of soles, and in the process of Kiddush, everything that goes on the Mizbeach has to undergo a process of Kiddush. Everything is secular until made sanctified, until you sanctify. Now, in the process of sanctification, we have a twofold process, a 2-stage process. And that reflects the 2 fundamentally different categories of Kedusha. One is what we call Kedushas Damim, and the other is Kedushas Haguf. Kedushas Damim means that I sanctify the value of an object. And Kedushas Haguf means I sanctify the object itself. Its very fibers and molecules are sanctified. In the case of Mizbeach, that which goes on to the Mizbeach requires Kedushas Haguf. So Nesachim and Menachos, insofar as they go on the Mizbeach, you have to be Mekadesh them and sanctify them with Kedushas Haguf. However, there's an earlier stage, and that's the stage in which you designate this, let's say this soles for a mincha, but you haven't yet put it into a Kli Sharis. In order to upgrade its sanctity to the highest level of guf, we need Kli Sharis. But the Kedushas Peh, which means when he verbally pronounces, I am designating this soles for a mincha, that only has the extent, the power to generate Kedushas Damim. Now, the fundamental difference is Pidyon. When you have kedushas damim without kedushas haguf, you can sell it on the open market, take the money and buy hegdesh with it. But the object itself can lose its status of hegdesh by transferring its kedusha over to damim, over to monies, through the process of pidyon. So let's say, for example, I have a mincha, but I haven't yet put it into the klishares, and I've only declared verbally that this is designated, singled out for a mincha. At that point, it has kedushas damim, and it still lends itself to what? To pidyon. Mincha sheskacha b'peh, verbal sanctification. Eina kedosha ela b'kedushas damim. It only has that lower level of hegdesh. Now here's another way that you could take something that's hegdesh. I mean, you're not allowed to do this, but if you did it, and you could remove and strip it of its status as hegdesh, and that's called me'ilah. If he decides to violate hegdesh by using hegdesh for his own purposes, he's moel behegdesh. Whole part of what he has to do in order to do tshuva, to rectify it, but that object is no longer hegdesh. He's machalel, he desecrates the kedusha of the object through me'ilah. But that only operates with regard to kedushas damin, but not to kedushas haguf. V'adayin efshel otzia lechulin al yedei pidyon. Not only is the mincha subject lends itself to me'ilah, but it also lends itself to pidyon because it only has that first level of kedushas damin. So now, how do I bridge that gap between kedushas damim and kedushas mizbeach or kedushas guf, so that now I can take this solas and use it as a mincha, be makriven on the mizbeach. Kidei lekadsha b'kedushas haguf, kodem sheboim lavod ba, avoda meaning put it on the mizbeach. Yesh lekadsha b'kedushas haguf. And how? Okay, you're telling me verbal pronunciation will only get me to X, only to kedushas dam. So how do I bridge the gap and upgrade the kedusha to kedushas haguf? The answer is kiddush zen nasa on the top of page test al yidei nesina bekli sharis. The fact that you have your mincha at this stage number one in a kli chulin, that doesn't lend itself to kiddush of kedushas haguf. It only lends itself to the limited kiddush of kedushas damin. But if you take the mincha now and you pour it into a klishares, then the klishares now generates the sanctity of kedushas haguf. It upgrades the kedusha. They also show once the mincha has been placed inside a klishares, then number one, Shuv ein la pidyon, you can no longer be poda it. In if seles b'chol psuli. Number two, me'ilah would not be machalal the kedusha because in kedushas haguf me'ilah does not in any way undermine the kedusha, the status of kedushas haguf. And moreover, once it has kedushas haguf, it lends itself to all the psulim mizbeach. For example, lina or tumah. But there are other examples as well. So what's lina? Lina means if I leave it overnight, it becomes pasul. Or if it came in contact with a tful yom or a mechusa kippurim, right? Mechusa kippurim is 4 cases of zav, zovi, yoletis, and mitzorah. If any of those have completed their process of tara, of purification, but they have not yet brought their korbanos, they are still considered tamid as a residue of tumah. And as a result, it is pasul l'mizbeach. At what point does this soles l'mincha become vulnerable such that it could become disqualified l'mizbeach? At what point does the mincha get upgraded to the status of kedushas haguf? And the answer is klishares. From the moment that he places the soles l'mincha into a klishares, the mincha is sanctified with Kedusha Guf, and as a result, it is subject to all the psulim, like Tuma, or like Lina, etc. Now, what kind of kli has that status of a kli shores that could be makadesh the mincha? The truth is that in the process of mincha, we're going to have kmitza, in which he holds the kli with the soles inside of it, and then he does kmitza. But what happens if the kli is sitting on the ground? He hasn't yet lifted it up, and he already poured the soles into the kli. Kiddush zeh, to sanctify the soles b'kedusha saguf, nase gam means afilu al yidei kli sharis hamunach hagabi karka, meaning tzarich sheyachzik a kli biyado. He doesn't have to hold the kli as he does later when he gets the kmitza at the moment of nesinas hasoles litoch hakli. And now we're going to discuss a concept called kiddush lechatzon. I just want to mention, Sandy, are you able to hear me? Okay, so.
Yes, I hear you fine. Before I didn't. Now I
Sandy, do. If I remember correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, my memory is that you're from the 5 towns, are you not?
Correct, yes.
Do you know Morty and Elaine Zinberg by any chance?
Yeah, you knew that her father passed away.
Oh, okay. So I just wanted to know if you know, because I got the Zoom link, so I'm going to be Kilu participating in the Levaya of Mrs. Greenberg. That's Elaine Zinberg's mom. Aleh Shalom, she just passed away over Zoom. So I just wanted to know.
Yeah, I saw that. Actually, I was with Gary Greenberg yesterday. We were in Katamon together in shul. So he must have left right after Shabbat.
Wow. Yeah, if Gary's going to Levaya of his mother, he has to leave right after. I mean, he should have left right after Shabbos yesterday. Hopefully
got on the plane.
He's got on the plane. The Levaya is at 11 a.m. on their time. Okay. Kiddush lechatzoin. What's this all about? And you'll see here that he quotes a sugya in Masechta Menachos, but the problem with the sugya is that it's all based on brisos. And it's very hard to pin this down in terms of the Tanoim and the Mishnah. In any event, let's go through the brisa. The brisa says the following: Soles miskadeshes b'kli shares, rak kisheyesh ba shir mincha. We need a minimum volume of soles such that it now lends itself to be a full-fledged korban mincha in order for the kiddush process to be effective. That's according to the Tanakhama, the first Tanakh, meaning it's an all or nothing proposition. You cannot be makadesh piecemeal in a klisharis. The klisharis only has the power to effectuate kedushas haguf if that which is placed inside this receptacle has all the qualities and all the qualifications of a mincha al hamizbech. It's got to have a shear, a certain volume. Let's call it a kezayis, let's say. Okay, we'll get into this a little bit later. So therefore, what we're saying is there's no such thing as kiddush lechatzoin. You cannot take part of a mincha and be mekadesh in a klisharis. It's an all or nothing proposition. Rabbi Yossi says, "Im nasan beklisharis pachos mikashir mincha, v'hayil lahosif olav ulashlimo l'shiuro hareu miskadesh miyad." The brisa quotes Rabbi Yossi that in the case of a mincha, is such a thing as kiddush lechatzoin, but only on the condition that his intention is to add to the klisharis the volume of solas that he needs in order to complement that which is already there and have a full-fledged mincha kashir, so he can do it piecemeal with this intention of adding the volume that's necessary, that increment, to reach the level of a shear that's roy limizbeach. And in such a case, we don't have to wait until such time as he actually fills in, that volume of the soles. But even before he fills in and completes the volume of the soles, there is kiddush b'kli sharis according to Rabbi Yossi, and that's called miyat, immediately. Now, everything that we said is according to the shita of Rav. I'm sorry. Let me get it again. Nothing that we said is according to the shita of Rav. Everything that we said is according to the shita of Rabbi Yochanan. However, Rav holds that this is a misquote. This is a libel, an accusation against Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi never said that you could be mekadosh in a kli shares, a mincha lechatzoin. And if, let's say, the shear of mincha was not achieved, was not added and poured into this kli shares, despite his intention to subsequently complement and make up the increment that's necessary, it would not become Kodesh. It remains Kedushas Damim, and it cannot be upgraded to Kedushas Aguf. And Rabbi Yossi would agree to that. So, for example, let's say in most cases, the shear of a mincha is what's called an isaron. We spoke about minchas chavitim and other categories of minachos that require an isaron. In some cases, if it's accompanying an animal, it will require twice that amount. Whatever the shear is, according to Rav Shita, it's universal. Less mandapoli, that there's no kiddush chatzon, it's an all or nothing proposition. Now, according to Rabbi Yochanan, in the sheet of Rabbi Yossi, his take on Rabbi Yossi is there is kiddush l'chatzon. How far are we going to go with that? In other words, we have now a sort of window that opens in front of us of kiddush l'chatzon in the case of a mincha where he started with less than the shear of an isaron, according to Rabbi Yossi, in the way he's understood by Rabbi Yochanan. And that's what we're going to analyze now. What happens, that's our next discussion here, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that we have kiddush l'chatzon, if the second half of the saron he places in a different kli, can he use chatzon to set up two different kalim, each one of these klei shares generates kedushas haguf on half of an isara in two different kalim. And on that, the Gemara tells us on Daf Ches in Masechta Menachos that Lidas Rabbi Yochanan ein kiddush l'chatzon. The only time that Rabbi Yochanan accepts the principle of kiddush l'chatzon according to Rabbi Yossi is a yesh l'kadosh es isaron kulo b'kli echad. He starts with a chatzi isaron, adds another chatzi isaron in the same kli. So now that kli goes through two stages, and in the first stage, the kli itself is anticipating the other half of the sarah, which in fact was added to the kli. But a kli does not, in and of itself, have the power to effectuate kiddush saguf on less than the shear. Rabbi Yochanan never meant to say that there's kiddush l'chatzon in a kli that only has now and will have a chatzi yisar and a chatzi shear. If this kli itself will eventually have a full shear, then the kiddush process began when there was half of a shear initially in the kli shar. So that's only because in this same kli we will add the other half of the shear. And this is based on a pasuk. In Vayikra Perek Vav, the Torah says the following: Mincha tamid machtzisa. And what does this mean, mincha machtzisa? It means the following: you could be makadesh the saron, but after rakli acharkach lichatzosa. Now, if I understand correctly, again, the language is a little bit tough here, but I think what he's saying is that if eventually you take that machzis and you build it up to become a full shear, then we could say it's a mincha tamid. It was sanctified. Now, at this point, we have another shita of Rabbi Eliezer, but that's going to be a sugya for tomorrow. I don't think we have time for it now. So let's just make a note of where we got up to. We're up to Rabbi Eliezer's shita regarding kiddush lechatzon. Let me just. So here we have Yud Aleph and Yud Beis. All right, good. Thank you very much, Steve. You're a gentleman and a scholar.